Hi guys, this is Sandra of the Alexandrite system. Today we're going to be talking about what is probably my favorite piece of DID-related media, the Blobbies. The Blobbies is a 2019 webcomic created by Emmengard, a system of many artists, several of which work on the comic. The comic is about a system finding out about their own plurality and learning to cope with it and work together. This comic really means a lot to me personally because when we were first finding out about the system, I came across these comics and I really empathized with it. And in a lot of ways, as the comic continues, I feel it continues to really mirror how our system has developed. So it really has a special place in my heart. We were lucky enough to get a chance to sit down with Emmengard and talk about the creative process behind the Blobbies. I'll be linking the comic down below in the description, and I highly recommend that you read it before watching this interview. However, if you don't know that there are going to be some light spoilers throughout. Also, this interview contains a content warning for the topics of violence between system members and death and grief in general. Do you want to start by introducing yourself?
I'm Ariadne of the Emmengard. We don't actually call it a system, we just say we're from Emmengard. And we do the Blobbies.
You guys are very public about being a system, just from what we read about on your Twitter and on your website. What made you want to be so open about being a system?
Well, sort of a macabre answer, but, well, that's just the one we have. Well, we just sort of figure we only get to ride this ride once for sure. Mm-hmm. And so we don't want to waste any of our time sort of pretending with people to be something that we're not or someone that we're not. We weren't aware that we were a system for a very long time. And so we just sort of felt like we didn't want to waste any more of the time that we have here. We also just really hate secrets. Like, we hate having to keep secrets. We just don't like them.
So what led to the creation of the Blobbies?
We'd been I don't know, I think we discovered we were a system and we'd been, ourselves for about a year. And we were starting to sort of counsel newer discovering systems, like just how you end up doing in the community. Like, if you're at all active, like, you end up like meeting people that are brand new, and then just sort of like trying to help them out, and as much as you can. Not that any of us are counselors, but we all do what we can. We all do our part. We kind of saw people running into the same problems over and over again. People just aren't ready to hear things sometimes until they're ready to hear them. So they're not going to hear you until they're ready to hear you. We kind of got tired of saying the same thing over and over again and not having people listen to us because it just wasn't working. And it was really exhausting, like, emotionally for us to like watch people just sort of going through the ringer over and over again. We thought, sometimes people just can't hear it if they're not ready to. But weirdly, in sort of a magical way, sometimes stories can get through to people in a way that just giving them advice straight doesn't. That's why we decided to all right, well, let's think about everything that newer discovery systems are going through and what might be helpful for them to see a story about, and let's do that. And let's make it a story, because that'll help more people, and they may actually hear it if it's in a story than if we're just giving them our advice.
What were those common issues that you kept seeing?
People just fighting with each other, people locking each other up, lots of stuff like that. And there is spoilers for the first tape or first 9 episodes of the Blobbies. What happens with Gray and Red, how Red sort of kills Gray, or no, backwards. How Gray sort of kills Red. That's actually something that we saw happening. So we did see violence in systems where people were attacking each other and even trying to kill each other. And it was just really, really heartbreaking. And so that was, I think, the final straw, was a system that we were sort of counseling ended up having a violent incident within their system. And we just decided we had to do something. And so we started drawing. Because that's what we do.
Again, I really empathize with that because a little bit after we first discovered the system, we found the plural subreddit, and one of your guys' comics was posted on there. I don't know, it really spoke to us, or it spoke to me, because I very much empathize with Gray.
That was the other part of showing it as a story and like showing it from individuals' perspectives is that like we really do love all of the characters. Like we don't like we really try not to demonize any of them. Like they're all making the best choices that they know how to make at the different times that they're making them, and it negatively impacts each other sometimes, but that doesn't mean that they're bad people. So we try to show that as much as possible, which is why it's like there's no real villains because that doesn't make sense in the world.
Who is part of the creative process for Blobbies? The early comics don't have individual system members credited, but the later ones largely credit you and mostly Finna, but some others seem to get involved.
Yeah, so everybody gets involved, and lately it's just been like, I don't know, Finna and I are just like front stuck lately. I don't know. It's like, hello, welcome to December, and your hosts will be these people for the month. It's really weird. But I really like hanging out with Finna, so it's a good team. Like, Finna and I make a great team. She's really adorable and funny. She makes me laugh. The creative process, Sylvia and I actually hammered out with the system friend. Myself and Sylvia and them, we all sort of collaborated and hammered out like the longer story arc and the longer plan for all 90. Yeah, I think it's gonna be 90 episodes. Yeah, so that was like set in stone like a long time ago. We're like, we're going to have 5 tapes and there will be 9 episodes on each side of each tape, and there'll be 2 sides to each tape, obviously. So yeah, 90 episodes, it'll be great. And we're gonna do, this order of characters being the point of view character for each side. And we hammered that out.
What made you want to go with that sort of framing device?
We didn't actually plan on it at first. We knew that we wanted to show it from different perspectives. Like we wanted to show it from like Gray's perspective and then go back in time and show it from Red's perspective. But we didn't have like the idea of like the tape until like we were done with the first side of the tape, like with the first 9 episodes. We were like, well, why is it switching and now we're going to be on like a completely different perspective and jumped back in time to the beginning? And then we were just like, I don't know, somebody just thought it was cute. They were like, it's like a tape. We're flipping over the tape. There's like 2 sides to every story, 2 sides to every coin, 2 sides to every tape. It's going to be great. Let's just run with it. And we were like, okay, sure, let's do it. It gives it like a structure, and I like that. I really like the structure. So if I'm in charge of doing the episodes, I always do them in like a 3x3 grid. Because I'm like, this is the most making sense of all the things. Because it also then, if you have 3x3 grids, then that's 9, and then you have 9 episodes. It's just, oh, you see, it's perfect. And then you end up with 90. Oh, it's great. I like the number 9 and squares. Squares are great.
Why did you start out with Gray for this perspective?
We started it with Gray because she's the one that sort of sees herself as being like the main person or the real person, and she's also sort of like in charge. And also it's sort of, I don't know, I guess maybe we partially did it just because like that's sort of where our story started. Like I was the one that was discovering that we were a system. I was like the person, and like and so I don't know, it just felt really natural to start with like a character that was sort of similar to me. So even though it's like not autobiographical, we do borrow a lot of like stuff from our own life, and that just felt like a natural choice.
I feel even if you're not writing something that's directly autobiographical, it always ends up being autobiographical in some way. I think that's just the nature of art.
Yeah, you can't escape your own story is what it really boils down to, so you might as well just embrace it.
Another style choice is that everyone in the system is represented and named after a color, with the sort of exception of Gray/Lillian.
Yeah, well, Lillian would be like their body name, so that's why she's like, I'm the person, so I'm Lillian.
So why do you go with that choice?
To make it easier on the audience. Like it's a huge cast of characters. Like it's so many different people to like keep track of and juggle, and so like making their character design really simple makes it easier just on like the people who are reading along and like trying to figure out what's going on. So that's why we did it, just to like make it easy on people. It's also just really cutesy. We like to keep things cutesy when at all possible, especially when dealing with like a really serious subject matter. Like usually the more serious the subject matter is, the more like cutesy and whimsical like our art choices will be. It's just that, like, it feels like a weird pairing to have, like, a heavy subject matter and then pair that with, like, a heavy art style.
Hmm.
Like, it just can get really heavy really quickly. And, like, if we really want to talk about the heavy subject matter, we sort of want to bring it up to where it's like you can talk about it and
Hmm.
it's not so scary and it's not so dark and like there is silliness and there is whimsy. So that's why we do it. If you're going to go into a battle, this is a quote from Phyllis. We have like quotes that we keep track of. This is a Phyllis quote. If you're going to go into a battle with your inner demons, you should definitely bring, and you can only like bring one weapon, you should definitely bring glitter glue.
One thing I really admire is that the color symbolism works in a lot of ways in the comic. I really love how the system is the only one that has color in this world. My reading of it is that Gray even starts out as Gray because we've seen her grow a little bit of purple in one of the more recent comics, but she starts out as Gray because she refuses to be a part of this. She doesn't see herself as being one of them.
It's a good reading. I like that. It works. The colors do work in a lot of like weird, interesting ways. So like work out nicely. Like the language of color is really interesting.
So we did a little bit of a deep dive into your guys' work in preparation for this. And one thing that I noticed as an interesting kind of parallel was that Weasel's comic At the Bottom of Everything has very similar imagery to the comic where Yellow and Blue go find Lime, with the sort of like memory jars and like light tree. Was that
Yeah.
intentional or subconscious?
Well, so Bjorn drew that episode.
Hmm.
Or at least the part that was like sort of the tan color background, like the first part of it, and then it shifts once they get to the dark beach.
Hmm.
And then there's like a drastic style change, like right there. And that's because Talia and Weasel were drawing that part of that episode. So it switched from like Bjorn doing it, and he did that part of it like really a long time ago. And then Migi actually started drawing it too, and then Tali came and like aggregated everything that had been done and then finished the episode with Weasel. So it was kind of because that was our first episode back after taking a fairly long hiatus, and it was sort of a difficult episode for us to do because it is sort of about like grief, and that was just yeah, it was a really hard episode for us to do considering everything that had been going on in our life. I think that Bjorn knew what he was doing, but it wasn't necessarily supposed to be like a super like he was pulling from Weasel's work and from Weasel's art styles and from like the world that Weasel has built in her random things that she's done. But yeah, I don't know exactly what it was supposed to mean. He knew what he was doing. But he was also like, yeah, I don't know, I just like this, so I'm gonna throw it in. Like I'm
Yeah,
gonna
why
steal
not?
this from Weasel. It's gonna be fine. So, and I do actually like having all the different styles for that because it is sort of this weird dream sequence. So it's kind of fun to like switch up the art styles. I don't know. I liked it. I thought it worked. It's a little awkward, but I also was like, yeah, it's good. Let's run with it.
One thing I do really love about your comic is that sort of shift in art style.
Like we try to keep it mostly consistent, but then over time it just sort of morphs. So, and that's fine. And we were kind of tied to the like 3x3 grid for a really long time. Well, at first we actually were just doing them in a strip because we were only posting them on Reddit. So we
Mhm.
were doing them as really long strips. And that sort of got ridiculous because then they could be like, you could have as many frames as you want, just an infinitely long strip. And I was like, this is getting out of hand. And then we added Instagram. We were like, we should post on other places besides only Reddit. So we added Instagram, and that is like a square. And it sort of like locks you into a square shape, which
Mhm.
I was fine with. I was like, this is perfect. Now we have to do 9 frames, and that's it. That's all you guys get. Also, it worked because we had a computer that could only really handle small pictures. So we
Mhm.
would draw each frame individually, and then we would like save them as like one layer and then like get all of those different pictures and then put them together into like a square just because like our computer was like bad and like it would start to really lag if we like drew it out like the whole thing with all the layers as the whole 9 by 9. So we were like we had to draw individual frames and then save them separately. It was ridiculous.
I can really tell that, to be honest, not in a bad way, but each frame is sort of packed with a lot of detail, and you saying that makes so much sense now.
Then we were like drawing them each individually by themselves and then putting them together.
Yeah. So if you could vanish one piece of DID media from the world, like it never existed, what
Split.
piece of media?
That's so easy.
What?
Split. That's so easy.
Why split over anything else?
I think it's like so. It's. I feel like that like idea of like the dangerous crazy person has always been around, but I feel like with Split, it really makes it so explicit and like awful in this like, yeah, because it's worse than just like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, or I'm trying to think of some other ones, like even Fight Club. I feel like Fight Club wasn't necessarily great, but it wasn't as bad as Split. Because, like, Tyler Durden, you kind of identify with him. You're kind of like, yeah, I can kind of see where he's coming from. Like, he does blow up a building, but...
He blows up a building, but also all the debt was erased, so, like...
Yeah, so he got rid of debt, and, like, he didn't kill anyone, so it's, like, whatever. Yeah, probably just Split. I guess there was also Mr. Robot, but I've never watched it. I've just heard that, like, actually the character is DID. Or
Really?
has DID. Yeah, in Mr. Robot, but, like, we never watched it. Like, we saw a couple episodes, like, because like maybe the first two were like free at some point because we don't have HBO or whatever it's on. And so like we watched like those two episodes and we're like, this looks really good. And then we never watched anymore, and like they don't get into the fact that he's DID until like episode, I don't know, the end of first season or something. We've just heard via the Reddit that he is.
Huh.
And that the portrayal is That's how they
Isn't it always?
Isn't it always? I mean, I feel like United States of Terra was... I feel like they did a pretty good job with that. I just hate it.
I've heard that exact sentiment so much.
I just hate it. I wouldn't want... I don't like them as people. Like, I just don't like them. I really don't like Terra. I don't like how she runs, like... Because she's sort of like the boss of the system. She's like... that really domineering host type person. It's just like, I just don't like her. I would not be friends with her. And she's like so mean to everybody in her system. And you're just like, why are you so bad at this? Like, just be nicer. Like, I don't know. I just don't like it. There's like a couple of them I might be friends with. Like, maybe I'd be friends with Buck. But other than that, like, yeah, I don't like any of them.
Yeah, I don't know why, like, so many DID things have just the worst people in this. I mean, I know it like creates conflict, and you need conflict in a story, but like when it's done by singlets, it's just so.
But I feel like this is actually true of media generally. This is, I think, the problem with like what we have with DID portrayals, where they actually try to do something with the United States of Terror, where they're actually trying to give a more honest portrayal. I think that just media and art generally is pretty bad at conflict, and they're bad at imagining like a way of telling a story where there is actually no villains, and that all of the like conflict is just sort of like these organic things that come out of people having different motives and different agendas. And I think that's why people really liked Game of Thrones at the beginning, because it was really showing it from all these different perspectives. So even if like the villain is like, oh, they're really quite a villain, like it shows you from the villain's perspective why they're doing what they're doing. And you're like, oh, well, I get that. That kind of makes sense what they're doing and why they're doing it. But like most media is very, and that's why Game of Thrones was so exciting and new for people, is they're like, oh my God, like they never do this. Like we never have like a story that's sort of told in this like sociological way, showing like the whole broader picture and showing how like conflicts of interest just arise naturally. And like we all just have to come together and try to sort out and figure out how to deal with that naturally. Instead of, there's a bad guy, we better go after the bad guy, and like they're bad because they're bad for no reason, they're just bad, you know? Like, yeah, I think all art is pretty bad at doing that. And so when normal mainstream Hollywood media goes to make a story about DID, that's the frame of mind that they're coming to us. Well, there has to be an evil one. There has to be a bad one. They're just bad because they're just bad.
I can definitely see that mindset in the Blobbies. Like, not there has to be an evil one mindset, but like conflict naturally arises when you get a bunch of people together.
Who knew? And I don't know, I think in the West we particularly have a problem in our art and in our media of that good evil dichotomy. And I think that if you get into like other types of media, like Eastern media, there tends to be, I don't know, a little bit more balanced storytelling. Not always, sometimes they're just as bad with like the good evil dichotomy.
Mhm.
But you do end up getting more of like that sociological storytelling where there isn't like an evil person. There's just like natural conflict because life is hard, and even if you're all just doing your best, like you're gonna run into roadblocks.
Mhm.
And I like that.
My final question here is, do you have anything to say to other systems?
Be kind to each other. That's about it. Yeah, be kind to each other. Take care of each other. And be kind to yourself. I think that actually, weirdly, is still the hardest thing to do. Like, I think that it is easier to be kind to other people than it is to be kind to yourself. And that even applies within systems. So it's easier for me to be kind to Finna, per se, than it is for me to be kind to myself. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So when you're in a system, you can kind of, it's like a simple little life hack where you're like, well, I can't be kind to myself right now, but I can be kind to the other people in my system, you know? But like, you should also make sure you're trying to be kind to yourself.
Hmm.
So, yeah, just be kind.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you answering all my questions and letting me just gush about your work a little bit.
Thank you for calling us to do an interview.
A big thank you to Emmengard for joining us for this interview. I will be linking their website as well as a direct link to the Blobbies and their Twitter in the description. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I will see you next time. Bye.